Hi guys, welcome to my presentation. A lot of people aren't using their carbohydrates properly. I get a lot of questions about this, and it's a very simple thing to implement. Quite complex as to why, but I'll hopefully make that nice and simple because we all know that I'm good at that. So I'm going to start off with what actually a carbohydrate is. Now, carbohydrates all get broken down to sugars. Actually, everything gets broken down into sugar by the body. We're like ants, we run on sugar. Okay, you can't avoid it, so stop trying. If we have just one single molecule of sugar, then we call that a saccharide, and that's where these terms come from. Two together is a disaccharide, more than two is a polysaccharide, but I've also drawn out the exact same thing here and called it a starchy carbohydrate. Don't know how well this shows on the video camera, but I put little green bits in there to represent fibre. And basically fibre is stuff that your body can't digest. It comes out of your other end exactly the same as it did coming in. Basically, we don't have goat's teeth, we can't chew it well enough, and we don't have enough stomachs like a cow to properly digest it. That's why it comes out that way. But fibre is really good. And people going low on their carbohydrates will often tend to be fibre deficient. Fibre is really essential stuff for making everything run smoothly through the system. In fact, when we go without it, we have any number of problems in there, including weight gain. And that's what this is aimed at, using carbohydrates to really knock out that last little bit of fat loss that you've been looking for. So if you're hitting a plateau and you're finding that you can't go forwards anymore, then have a little look at this, and this will really hopefully blow your mind. This is probably going to be nicked by Horizon like all the other stuff I put out there. Let me just change this and I'll get back to you. Okay, now you'll find starchy carbohydrates in any number of foods, but probably the best examples for it is stuff that's wheat-based, all the pastas and cereals and so forth like that. You'll also find them very naturally occurring. These are the ones that I do recommend in stuff like turnips and swedes and so forth like that, and also seed-like grains, or sorry, grain-like seeds even, such as quinoa, buckwheat, amaranth. These are the sort of things that I personally tend to use. In fact, to be honest, when I'm carb loading, it's going to be either cold-pressed, steel-milled organic porridge oats, or it's going to be quinoa. Simply because in both cases they're really easy to hide in other foods. They're both quite boring and bland, I think, so I hide them in other stuff, in protein shakes, in meal replacement stuff. And quinoa, to be honest, you can just use that like mincemeat. Cooking-wise, quinoa is very simple. Okay, so here's your body. That's your whole body, and we're going to divide off this little bit, and we're going to call this bit muscle. Okay, this bit up here we're going to call you metabolism. Now, let's say somebody eats an awful lot of carbohydrates. Never mind about what time of day, I'll come to that in a second, or what kind now. They just eat some carbohydrates with that fibre in there. The complex molecules takes a while to bar down. So they're starchy carbohydrates, they're slow digesting. Sugar obviously digests very quick. The body wants to turn that into sugar, so that comes in, and a certain amount, let's use a different pen actually. A certain amount is going to be used up there with the general running of the day. As you sit there watching this presentation, your metabolism is up and running. Actually, that will account for around and about 70% of your BMR, your basal metabolic rate. That's the amount of calories that you're burning off just laying in a coma. Okay, so that's your metabolism, accounts for a little lot. None of it will actually go into your muscle unless your muscles are tired. So let's just assume that you've worked out that day, and the amount of carbohydrates in your muscle will go up. Some of the carbohydrates you just ate are going to go into your muscle, and that's going to store that away for you very nicely till you next come to use it. Every muscle in your body has its own very private little fuels tank that it will put stuff in. A lot of other stuff will get stored in the liver. However, anything excess, anything not needed, because the body runs on sugar, it likes sugar and easy sources of sugar, and carbohydrates are very good. They're long lasting, they burn into loads of ATPs. You'll hear a lot of people talking about how fat and protein can be burnt as energy. If energy is marked as ATPs, amino triphosphates, you're going to get somewhere around about half a dozen amino triphosphates out of a gram of protein, but you can get sort of like 36 to 38 out of a gram of carbohydrates. Very efficient stuff, and that's why it's handy for your workouts. But let's say that there's this extra bit of you here, and that's your blubber. And anything excess, not used by the metabolism and not used by the muscle, is all going to go in there and be stored as fat. We came across this bit of info, we started telling the world this, and straight away everybody went low carb. And they had good results at the start of it, but then we start to see those results slow down, it comes backwards, and now I'm going to tell you why and how to beat that. Okay, so let's assume that you are exercising and that some of that carbohydrate store is going to go into your muscles. That's absolutely lovely. I'm going to draw out a chart here. Okay, there's week 1, there's week 2, week 3, week 4. Okay, and here's the amount of fat that's being burnt off. Let's say, I know up here somebody's got, say, 20 kilos of fat. Up there. Down there they've got 10. Down there they've got 0 kilos of fat. Lovely. So they're wanting to get down here. And 2 people both start out at the same time. They both go low carb. For that first week, they both see their weight loss gains go to there. And so does Harry. What then happens is that Tom, we're using Tom and Harry here, we can bring in Dick later on. Tom in the black line, he carries on the low carb through the second week, but he can't help but notice the fat loss doesn't happen as much. In fact, when it comes to the third week, that's not there. And the graph will actually start going back upwards. So let's say by the 4th week, it probably wouldn't happen that soon, but by the 4th week, he actually starts gaining fat, even though he's not eating any complex carbohydrates. He's confused as to why. Now, his mate Harry comes along. He also goes low carb for the first week, but then at the end of the week, he has a cheat day. He piles in loads and loads of chips, loads of potatoes, even a bit of cereal, why not? For the next day or two, he gains fat. But what he's also done is that he's reset a little mechanism in his body that requires carbohydrates. Yes, your gut lining itself does like carbohydrates, even though complex carbohydrates tend to wreck the gut lining. That's all part of the process. Think forest fires. You know, the forest gets too big, burns down, you get a new forest, bosh. It's all part of it. Okay, the fire isn't too good for the squirrel who's living in the tree at the time, granted, but looking at the bigger picture of the forest, it's good a long way. So for the second week, he then has some more fat loss. And he thinks, oh, this is good. And he then decides to have another cheat day. He gets a little bit fatter, but then he carries on through the week. He goes low carb for another few days. And then he, as a result, he loses a bit of weight. When we come to week 4, having done that spike every week, he's lost more fat. Okay, granted, if you can go from 20 kilos to 0 kilos of fat in 4 weeks, you've probably just been to see your surgeon. But the point stands the same. Look at this graph and see what's happening. Now let's focus in for a second on this bit here. This is an idea that everybody struggles with at first. If you can get your head around this one thing, it will help you more than you can possibly realise in losing fat. Gaining fat is good to lose fat. Consider a bank account. Actually, because this happened to me. I had a bank account, I wasn't paying any money in, but it was in the overdraft, so it kept paying money out. I kept losing fat. I kept getting letters from the bank saying, you know, you're in financial crisis and everything else. It was only like about 50 quid, but the point is, as soon as I set up a direct debit that paid in just £2 every month, they stopped sending me the letters. They didn't worry. They didn't mind the fact that it was overdrawn because of it the whole time. Think also of a cupboard door. That's your fat. The more that you take stuff out, the less the cupboard door wants to open, because you're robbing all of its resources. It doesn't want you to do that. It's a jealous cupboard. It's a very stingy cupboard. It wants to keep everything in there. So what if we take out 10 things, but to keep it happy, we put 1 thing back in? That means that tomorrow we can take out another 10 things, as opposed to only being allowed to take out 1 or 2 things. Somewhere in all of that, there's a life lesson in how this works. And if you can manage to turn that into a nice shape that fits inside your head, seriously, it will revolutionise your training. On to the next bit. Okay, I'm going to draw out another little graph. This is your blood sugar. This is this next bit here. This is to do with using carbs with your workout, because the most effective way to use carbs is on your workout days, and I'll explain in a second. Okay, there, down at 0, and up there, 10, and this is all in millimoles or millimeters per litre of blood sugar. Okay, down here we have 3, and there we have 7. These are the 2 basic magic numbers. You want your blood sugar to be between 3 and 7 millimoles. Here, let's just add in time. In this case, we're going to add in about 4 hours. Okay, this hour here, that's your exercise hour. Okay, Alright, so you start off your day up there on say 5, it comes down a little bit, and that's how much blood sugar you have previous to the day because you haven't eaten anything. You continue to not eat, you have your workout, your blood sugar will dip even lower. Let's just say, for example, at this moment, it drops below that magic line into less than 3 millimoles. This is actually a good thing, believe it or not, because this will make your liver produce some stuff called glucagon. That is a massive fat burner. In fact, it's basically the fat burning tool, and ways of turning this on and off is quite important. And then that will bring your blood sugar back up to a more comfortable level for you. All of this done with absolutely no carbs. The only problem is that this level here, where that glucagon is stimulated, to put it in real simple terms, tomorrow it's going to be up there. The day after it's going to be up there. And it will go for more and more base rate that you go into. Essentially, this is one way of managing to contract type 2 diabetes. There's others, but this is quite a good way. You've got to be pretty extreme with your workouts, granted. Let's take it another way. What if, beforehand, an hour or two beforehand, you have some complex carbohydrates. So your blood sugar is quite high, but it's not so high that we're going to start stimulating insulin. We don't want to do that yet. Your workout, of course, brings it down, but then immediately after your workout, and this is kind of the key point here, immediately after your workout, you take on board something sugary. Apple, a pear, something like that. Very quickly digested, very quickly goes back in there. Because of, just going back again, remember when I said you've got that, and in here is your muscle, and that's your metabolism. The amount of storage in your muscles right now is really low, so it's going to start desperately refilling that. So you have a kind of a bit of a hall pass for a little while that you can meet pretty much what you want, and it will go into there. If you're going to have some sneaky medicinal chocolate, it's straight after a workout or immediately before, for these reasons. The workout will bring that down before the insulin can store that sugar from the chocolate as fat, and the muscles will eat it straight afterwards. That process will actually last for about half an hour. You've got a half an hour window for that sneaky Mars bar. But after that sugar, it will start dropping down again, because this process is quite expensive with the muscles there. The metabolism is now working not at 70%, but more at sort of like 75. It doesn't sound like a lot, but through the course of a day that actually does. So that needs to come back up again, and that is where our second meal can come in, where we have some carbohydrates mixed in with everything else. I'd recommend like a 40-30-30 split. 40% of your calories coming from protein, 30% from fat, 30% from carbohydrate. Okay, I've got Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday and Sunday. In there, let's use just a black pen for when we do have carbs. Now what I've tend to find is that the 2 days that I'll go really heavy and have lots of workouts tend to be Mondays and Wednesdays. Interestingly, I don't necessarily work out more, I just work out more often as I try to fit in little sort of like 15 to 20 minute workouts in between clients and other stuff. These are quite busy days for me, you see. I'm chasing around doing an awful lot. I don't actually have 2 hours for a full-on workout. Fridays and the weekend, yeah, I do tend to. So here's what my carb intake looks like. On these days, it's pretty high. And on these days, some, as a rule. I'm not too fussed about it. If there's none, I don't care about that either. The point is I have at least 2 days of the week where I do carb load, and the carb loading tends to happen before about 5 PM, so I've got time to burn it off and hit a workout with it. Now, by doing that, each time that I do this, I'm going to draw a little smiley face on here. I'm running out of pens. There's one little smiley face. There's another little smiley face in terms of the carb trap. Those are my 2 little spikes going on. Those 2 little spikes that help me keep losing weight like that, as opposed to a steady graph like so. And that's how I stack them in. These other days, I'm focusing, to be honest, more on the protein and fats. And to be honest, at the weekend, it's really protein only for me. And these days, fats, I'll come on to fats later on, but avocados, dark chocolate, nuts and seeds, nuts especially, really good sources of fat. A bit of olive oil, and to balance it all off, loads of cider vinegar. Another reason for that, don't worry. What haven't I covered? that's basically it. That's basically it. If you haven't got it from that, I can't really explain it any clearer over these means. You'll just have to give me a phone call or come and see me. The thing is, like I say, remember your approved carbohydrate sources are generally going to be all your buckwheats, your amaranths, and your porridge oats that I personally endorse. Potatoes, some people are intolerant to potatoes, and if you're intolerant to them, then you're virulently intolerant to them. Potatoes are quite an extreme thing. Interestingly, you've heard, I'm sure you've heard of the glycemic index, and there's also a thing called the glycemic load. The glycemic index is about how quickly something is released into the bloodstream. The glycemic load is how much there is to be released into the bloodstream. So cooked parsnips and watermelon both have a glycemic index of 95. They both absorb very quickly. You'll get a sugar spike in the insulin response and everything else. And the difference there really is that there's only actually it's 4 to 26, I believe, from memory on the glycemic load. So the watermelon absorbs just as quick, but there's much less of it to absorb, so you'll get less of a hit. Whereas with the parsnips, it'll hit you and keep on hitting you, and that's something else to bear in mind there.